I've actually been on an interview where it was like a part 3 board exam, and I actually had to do a case. I had to work up a case, and I had to
Interesting.
write out a diagnosis and write up a management plan. Say this is how I would actually approach this.
Wow.
Because again, these were hiring people who had good relationships and needed to make sure that anybody they brought on board had the diagnostic capability and acumen to actually meet the goals and rigors of their practice.
Welcome back to the Prospecting Show, where each week we talk about tips, tricks, and methods for growing an amazing small business pipeline. I'm your host, Dr. Connor Robertson, and on this podcast, you can expect segments on communication, sales, prospecting, and closing. Thank you to everyone who has supported my 100 episodes and 100 days goal going into 2020. Enjoy the show.
But certainly when it comes to higher education, there is almost this default where if a student just gets that piece of paper at the end, you're good to go.
Right. And I think that's a false security though for a lot of people, right? I think at the end of the day, a lot of people go through programs and say, well, I'm getting this piece of paper and it affords me some opportunity. And I would almost argue today that depending on what industry you're in, your opportunity is all built on what you do every day. There are more people making millions of dollars online, solving huge problems that have never been to any education, right? You got the Elon Musks of the world and some of these brilliant minds that have never actually gone through the system. And that might be an extreme. But at the end of the day, do you think that education, formal education, is always the answer? Or do you think it's the pursuit of learning more that matters?
I can't remember who it was, but I heard recently about this gentleman who took an entire 4-year MIT program all online in like a year and a half or something ridiculous.
Sure.
And he actually taught himself how to do all of the coding and basics, and he did it. He went through it and he did it. Now, what he got out of that was the skills to actually write everything and do the computer language and such. But what he didn't get was the piece of paper saying that he graduated from MIT.
Sure.
So there's still this, I think we're in a transition. 20, 30 years ago, that piece of paper from a college absolutely said you should be hired.
Right.
But we've inflated higher learning so much that, having an advanced degree is more the norm than the exception.
Right.
And when you have an overabundance of what we typically call qualified applicants, you have to come up with some way to vet them, or otherwise,
right, some other metric, right? Some measurable. Yeah.
And what we're seeing, at least, so I can speak personally with my field in chiropractic, and what we're seeing is that interviewers are becoming much more sophisticated with their hiring techniques. So they'll actually ask interviewees, and again, I hear this all the time because as an instructor, my students are coming back and telling me, this is what happened on my job interview, and this doc had me do this. And, and certainly at the time when I was looking for employment, I've been through that drill a few times. So, what we're really seeing is kind of 3 different ways in which interviewers are looking for quality candidates. One is, can you do the skills that we need you to do? For us, it's, can you do an adjustment?
Right.
Can you actually perform it? So they want to see that skill actually in action. The second is knowledge-based. Do you know what we need you to know? I've actually been on an interview where it was like a part 3 board exam, and I actually had to do a case. I had to work up a case, and I had to write out a diagnosis and write up a management plan. Say this is how I would actually approach this.
Wow.
Because again, these were hiring people who had good relationships and needed to make sure that anybody they brought on board had the diagnostic capability and acumen to actually meet the goals and rigors of their practice. And then the third one is, you get somewhere in between where they're not as interested in, your mental abilities or your demonstrative practical abilities, but now they want to know, are you a good fit for the office? And that's something that we haven't really touched on yet, is a lot of hires, especially if like in small businesses, they're going to hire you more on a personality match than they necessarily will on a skills match, because some offices and some professions will say, well, I can teach you some of these skills. I know that you're minimally proficient, but I'll get you the rest of the way. What I want to know is, am I going to be happy when I come to work every day?
Right. And that's important, right? You
Yeah.
hear about culture, startup companies. A lot of them are looking at, well, how can I create a better environment for the office, for the people, the graduates that are coming there? And it's interesting you bring that point up. And I'm not sure if I've ever even told you this, but my parents own a executive recruitment firm and have been doing that for 20 years, hiring people for these corporations. And I would say more now than ever, especially in healthcare, because that's what they focus on. People are definitely hiring on what you're talking about, which is that personality driven. We've had people who are amazing fits on paper, amazing fits in their accolades or their achievements over the last few years. And the hiring managers are looking at that and saying, yeah, but the personality of this individual doesn't fit our team. They are definitely qualified. They got lots of experience. They have lots of achievements, but they just don't fit our personality. And for that reason, we're going to pass. And I think personally, I look at that and go, holy smokes, this is changing massively, because back in the day, it used to be you have the resume and you could almost hire it off the resume. And that was the way it is. But now it's all these soft skills, these different interactions. Am I going to enjoy going to work? And you're seeing all these degrees that have no terminal fate. Whereas chiropractic's like you go to school, you get the chiropractic degree to become a chiropractor or something in chiropractic for the most part. There are lots of other degrees that you can go a million different ways. And so when you look at other people who've chosen degrees before chiropractic, what do you think the greatest success is in for those people? Is there a specific degree or specific background that you think makes great physicians, maybe chiropractic, maybe PT, maybe anyone that you've really seen? Is there a specific degree that you would attribute to that?
I actually wouldn't, personally. I think what ends up making the good physician is a lot of those soft skills that often get overlooked in formal teaching environments. Empathy, humor, compassion, just personality, friendliness. Eventually people learn to be good diagnosticians, and they figure out what the algorithms for healthcare are. But if you like what I think, I would define success in healthcare as not somebody who only treats the disease, but can also treat the person.
Right. And that's an interesting point too, because you see a lot of these clinics now, especially in the chiropractic space, you have this dichotomy of the straights and the mixers, or whatever you want to call it, right? The very original chiropractic, adjust the spine only, and then the mixers more in that rehab, functional space, muscle, kind of physical therapy, kind of tie-in rehab, kind of, togetherness. And you see this dichotomy right now because you have the graduates who 30 years ago started practicing, and then you have the new age docs. How do you see the profession, or just healthcare in general, transitioning? Because there's a lot of professions that have that dichotomy, right? Even cardiology is a perfect example. Like, back a few years ago, it was more about what's the right medication and what's your blood pressure and all this. Now there's some transition that's looking at what's your lifestyle, what's your stress, what's your work environment, what's your exercise. Like, you're looking at these more holistic, whole type solutions. Where do you see that going long term? Do you think everyone's going to go into that kind of mindset, or you think there's going to be this dichotomy still of old school and new school?
Well, as current evidence continues to come out, what we're seeing time and time again is that the best approaches to healthcare are always a multidisciplinary, multimodal approach. So I think the most successful treatments for patients, down the road, are going to be those that are best able to integrate as many services as possible to really best care for their patients.
Right.
As a summary for this segment, technical skills are great, but personality and culture have a lot to do with how successful you're going to be long term, because people work with other people. They don't just work with skills. Situations might be uncomfortable, but if you develop those soft skills over time, that can really help you launch a career into something next. You have to look at the opportunities that you have right now and the opportunities you could potentially have in the future, and decide whether or not it's more risky to stay in what you have, or is it more risky to jump for something in the future. Don't fall victim to a wrong fit. Make sure that you're having a great experience. And if it's not right for you, don't feel like you have to continue to do it. Make that change, improve yourself, improve your lifestyle, and improve the outcomes.